Thank you. Today is a very important day for Guyana. It's the 5th of October. And the 5th of October represents to us in the People's Progressive Party a day that started the renewal process in our country. But it does not have significance only for those who are members of the PPP or support the PPP. It has great significance for all the people of this country. And so today there are going to be a series of activities by the People's Progressive Party to draw attention to how important those elections were in 1992, the 5th of October, 1992, to the entire process of changing our country. You would recall that we had almost 28 years of PNC rule prior to that, in which we lost a significant part of our population from migration. Our economy was considered one of the poorest in the world. We were compared with Haiti in this hemisphere. Our per capita GDP was just under $300 US. Contrast that with today, it's $17,000. And there was this era of hopelessness. The Caribbean Conference of Churches, when they came to Guyana to do an assessment in the early 90s, they said it was not only the large amount of deprivation that they found in the population, but it was this era of hopelessness in Guyana that bothered them the most. And if you have an opportunity to read that, the report from the Caribbean Conference of Churches, it will help to paint a picture of the era pre-1992, when there was no freedom in this country, where elections were won through a process of rigging, and that's well documented, although the current leader of the opposition continues to deny that PNC has been rigging elections to stay in office, when the entire world knows that that's the truth. If you look at the Lord Aylesbury report, you look at the CIA website or their reports, reports coming out from bilateral sources that are done from OECD countries, you will see all of that. The Commonwealth, it's a well-established fact, apart from the fact that we here in Guyana not just know it, but we are the victims of the rigging ourselves, and many people went to jail, many were killed in that period fighting for a return of democracy to democracy and freedom. Father Dark was killed, a number of other people. Walter Rodney was assassinated, and that's now established based on the Commission of Inquiry. He was assassinated by the PNC when he sought to bring about changes in the country. So it's a very dark past that we are coming from, and that day was a crucial turning point for us and our country. But the elections were not easy themselves. Just to give you an idea of the mood on election day in 1992, this is what President Carter in his book said. The book was written in 2007. It's called Beyond the White House. The most personal danger I felt since leaving the White House was in Guyana in 1992. That's a former US president saying that in his book, the most personal danger he felt. I recall being up here, at that time I was much younger, and the mood out there. We had mobs attacking Freedom House. We had to get the door shut twice. Miles Fitzpatrick got trapped just out there by the mob. We had to almost break out the door to get him back in here. People were just roaming the streets. Hamilton Green was leading bands of people around on the street, because by the time the count started and they knew what the results were, even on the day of voting itself, they had a lot of disruption. And so it was not an easy thing to effect those changes. And the only reason that the elections were won, because in the reforms, when President Bush and Sr. and President Carter wrote Mr. Hoyt, under pressure they agreed to count the ballot at the place of poll, which was a crucial thing. Prior to that, the ballots were taken, all the boxes, to a central location, like in Queens College or somewhere else, and then the army would lock everyone out, and they would, when the results came out, in my village, which is like almost everyone supported the PPP, APNU will get, the PNC will get 90% of the votes from my village. Where votes didn't, they just change the ballots. People found wads of ballot stapled together in rubber bands in trenches, extra boxes and stuff. So for young people particularly who don't know our history, I hope that you will go back and read some of this, not just about the various documented cases of rigging, but the era, the economics of the era, the social dynamics, how far our country came, downwards. And like public servants, people started, they couldn't, public service, couldn't earn a living. They were pauperized when the devaluation came. And the exchange rate moved from $4 to 1 to 126 US to 1. And their salaries were fixed. So they were earning, like in the 70s, maybe 100 odd US a month. That fell to like $20 per month in some cases. And therefore people started doing all sorts of things, trading, etc., to earn a living. So for young people who have had a more recent experience of APNU trying to steal elections, that is in the 2020 period, this was a tough period, but we had more eyes on them. Social media now was available, so a lot of the plots could be exposed by ordinary people, and we could get the information early out. For example, we had uploaded, by the second day after the elections, we had already built a website, because we knew, knowing the nature of the PNC, that they will attempt to steal elections. And so we built a website before, and we just populated them with our statements of poll. So 2 days after the elections, you could have gone and examined the statements of poll from the People's Progressive Party. These were for the country, but copies that we got, over 90% of them were uploaded to our website. And immediately, until now, the statements of poll that APNU received, they have them locked away in Congress Place, waiting for the court case to show that they won the elections with those SOPs. They haven't seen the light of day as yet. So I hope that young people will not treat this day as just any other day. It was a crucial change, a period for renewal. And And Dr. Jagan had this to say. He said, October 5th is a time for democratic renewal, a time for the rule of law, a time for peace and harmony, a time for change and to rebuild. A bold new era is before us. Let us move forward in togetherness. So that was his statement. And that is why you would see a serious attempt at rebuilding. And we can trace our history of rebuilding almost every system. We started making Parliament was non-functional. We not only had constitutional reform, we passed one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. I saw in Washington, there was some talk about inclusivity in the Parliament, but no other British colony or any country in the Commonwealth, and maybe in most countries in this region, have such an inclusive constitution as the one we passed, that is with opposition's involvement. I don't want to go through the features again. I did so a time, but joint management of the Parliament. In the past, it used to be the executive managed Parliament. Representation in the standing committees, in the rotation of the chairmanship, more participation in the appointment of the commissions, the 4 major commissions, judicial, police, teaching, and public service commissions, the involvement in the constitutional commissions and vesting them with authority of just even with powers of sanction over the executive. I can go on. But major constitutional change. I would dare say that most countries go through several generations and have not seen the kinds of bold changes we made in our constitution in the last maybe 25 years or so. And then that was early in our period too. This happened in about 2001. And so that was one important factor. We moved back to a strong separation of power with the government having a greater, there was a time in that period under APNU where the flag of the PNC flew over the court, the High Court here. Now, that was the ultimate in paramountcy of the party. We quickly moved back to independent judiciary. We started professionalizing the army. In the past, you got into the army and the senior leadership of the police force through the YSM, the Young Socialist Movement, which was the youth arm of the PNC. So many of those leaders emerged from a party background into the army. We made it purely an issue of professional. You recruit not from party, but from the public. And then on the economy, you've seen the changes. I don't want to go back about all those changes on infrastructure, on tackling the debt, getting rid of the burden. That was a major success for us. Moving from a bankrupt economy, totally bankrupt, we couldn't pay our debts, to one that is probably the most, even before oil, one of the most viable economies in this region in terms of growth prospects and everything else. So it's been a big journey, and with lots of challenges along the way. The same, you recall the insurgency, what they call the crime period, the difficult period, with about 400 people killed over a number of years. It wasn't in 1 year, because they make it look like, they say 1,400. That's with Fort Burke and others. But if you look at that, that was an insurgency. We have had all kinds of street protests, fires lit, all sorts of things to derail us from the democratic renewal and the growth. Nevertheless, we persevere. Success is like in the housing sector, unbelievable. I recall in '92, there was no Ministry of Housing. October 5th, when we took over, there was no Ministry of Housing. The last set of houses were built by Burnham in 1985. And they were like in places like Melanie and the other areas. Nothing happened since then. That has been a major success. Today, tens of thousands, over 100,000 people have received plots of land, and they have now, we have added maybe 70,000 houses to the stock of homes in our country, which is major in a country that maybe would have about 300,000 to 350,000 households, with 800,000 people. So this is a major success, and we can talk a lot about it. It's a day, very important day for us, because it allows us to reflect back on not just the progress but challenges to democracy, and it comes at an appropriate time too, when there could be a rewrite of history, when even the people who were the perpetrators would never acknowledge that they did this. And if they can't acknowledge that, then how do you engage on moving forward? It can be within a framework of lies and half-truths and delusion. That's why I'm saying that any engagement with the opposition on a sustained basis over the long term that involves working at the level of the executive has to have a foundation built on facts, truth, and APNU. Imagine APNU going to say to the Washington that the PPP tried to steal or stole the 2020 elections. How? It's not how divorced they are from reality, but how shameless could you be? And how could you do that with a clear conscience when everything points to the contrary, including the State Department that was part of the charge? The United States State Department and the staff there, they don't change with administration except for the political leadership. They have stability in government. They know of the several attempts to steal elections because they helped to fight it off, the US government. And therefore, people have to think that if you lie about that, what else would you lie about? What else would you not lie about? So, this brings me to the much talked about and Washington conference. So in retrospect, I think Burke is a criminal, but he's very clever. And Burke knows about the charges he's faced here in Guyana, where there are documented cases of him extorting people. And that charges have been laid already against those individuals because they have them on tape documenting, trying to extort businessmen here using social media. Now, Doreen Bess was charged for the same affair too. The same man that they use as the person we're discriminating against, he was charged as part of a plot to extort people. So Rickford Burke is aware that at some point in time that his criminality will catch up with him in the US. And I think the US policymakers would start distancing themselves from his extremism, and because they would now get the facts directly from the government, and they have started to get some of that. So this conference was not about Guyana. This was about safeguarding himself. Secondly, It was a conference to extort and get people to pay money. It was money making. So the reports I got, because we're a big party, we get reports from there. It was a small gathering of individuals, if you look at it. I think the 15 or so who went up from Guyana were probably more than the group in the room. And you notice they didn't give you big crowd shots of the conference. So it was a small gathering. And people had to, of course, pay to go there. And many were non-Guyanese. So this guy said to me, one of the men approached him and said he was told to come there, he had to pay $10,000 because he is interested in investing in Guyana, and he was told he'd be meeting with policymakers from Guyana. So when he showed up there, he thought it was the government policymakers. He then heard from the opposition. So he had a conflict with Burke. He wanted back his money and all of that. This was a Haitian guy. So I'm not sure how many of that happened, how much of this happened, but I know it happened for sure because I have at least one case, and I'm trying to get some more details to see if the people will go public. So this is what happened, and what was interesting is that after the much vaunted, like they would be addressed by tons of congressmen, etc. I don't know, I may be wrong because I did not follow this, but I don't think a single congressperson addressed the conference. So, again, he lied to people. It was money making. It was typical Rickford Park. And the only resolution they had, one resolution, was to ban Jagdeo from going to the US. One resolution. You would think that a conference, a Washington conference on Guyana, at which 15 persons from the opposition, the key leaders and the contenders all go up there, that they would call on the government for something, they would want something more structural. Their only resolution was to ban Jagdeo from going into the US. So I'm not too worried about that. And they can continue. Rickford Burke is very concerned about me because I would call him for what he is, a criminal. And that is what I think bothers him a lot. But what was more pathetic, imagine APNU is celebrating today PNC, 60-something years of the foundation of the party when the Burnham faction left the PPP. And to allow, as I said before one time here, that we've always had or been adversaries, PPP, PNC, over a long historical period. But you still had some residual respect for each other based on this common belief that we want to work for our country. But to have a whole party, imagine the leader of a party, the leader of the opposition, Roysdale Ford and Amanza Walton and the whole AFC, go to a conference organized by a criminal and sit down like it was pathetic. Just sitting down in a conference being lectured to by Burke. They went to a Burke conference. They didn't go to an opposition event there. They were led by the nose. This is a big political party. This is like a French criminal in the US saying that I will I will arrange an event in the US and you will need to come up. Do you think, even President Granger, you think a Granger would have sat through that meeting that Brickford Burke had there with a smattering of people and being lectured to by Burke, and they sit there like, I don't understand, with blank faces almost, as though lost, listless. I saw the body language, listless, lost faces, sitting there, you know, with blank faces. Of course, Amanda, well, not only the face was blank, but she blanked out on math, which is a common thing with her. But this is what happened. And they've reduced their whole political party to a pathetic group of people in the leadership. Roysdale Ford got into trouble again, I saw, because he and some others were using Doreen Bess. And I didn't know the guy was wanted in the US too. I thought he was just charged here for criminal activities. But now we realize that he's charged in the US and a fugitive from the US based on a letter that was sent to the media. Now they're telling the US government that a fugitive from justice in the US is the subject of discrimination from this PPP government, who was charged as part of an extortion plot with Burke for here in Guyana. This is what it was. And so I looked at some other things too, not the conference. I saw the pictures of them walking through like tourists through the Capitol Hill. Now Capitol Hill, anybody can go there. You can go there, you buy a ticket and you go in. You can walk through those halls. They allow tours, conducted tours. And that's what they did. Like they had a lot of conducted tours on the corridors. They were snapping pictures. Then they came down on I saw an image of it, I think at Demar Waves or something, and they stood on the step of the Capitol building to give a press conference. So I thought it was the international media who was talking to them. And then I realized it's the Sherrod Duncan. They walk with Sherrod Duncan as their media. Now, they held this conference in the press club. Imagine you holding this in the building that you're holding it is in the press club, but you didn't mobilize a single US press to interview you or carry any of your stories. You had to get your Sherrod Duncan, who kept posting at the bottom of the feed, donate, donate, donate to me, all the time, donate. It looked like they were raising money there. I saw one man asking for $100 each. They were going to raise a fund to invest in Guyana and put in $100 US each at the conference. So it was like a pathetic show. It would have been better had they not just gone and sent up their lies to the people in Washington. Better for them. Just made a complete set of fools of themselves. That's precisely what happened. So they were doing a lot of the corridor pictures, touring pictures, and all of this. And then I saw Cathy Hughes saying, oh, they spoke about press freedom in Guyana, freedom of movement, undermining democracy. Now it's wrong that the police stopped Patterson from going up. Because what would Patterson tell the people there? But Patterson is charged. The facts are that Patterson here is charged for several matters related to corruption and recently to exposing himself and being abusive to people when he was drunk and walking around the road. That's a fact. They don't recall that in 2015, there was a private criminal charge against me. Private. There's nothing to do with the state. And spurious by Christopher Ram. And the magistrate, and I think was influenced by APNU, prevented me from traveling. On a private criminal charge, not a state-instituted criminal charge, and I was, at that time, a former president. So people keep having short memories in this country about the vindictiveness of APNU. You recall that every person had to go to Soku. Every former president, Ramatar, Sam Hines, myself, going through there for frivolous things all the time, luncheon, every minister under the PPP government. And today you talk about police excesses. Today people have really short memories here and talk about police excesses and political harassment of your opponent. And they talk about these people, I see the Mingos and the others. Look what's happening in the US with the people charged. Some of them are they were charged, they get convicted. We can't even get the cases going here because you have a musical chair with the magistrates, with Jordan and the others. One doesn't want to do it, then they pass it to another. After 6 months, the other one doesn't do it, musical chair. They don't want to listen, hear the matters. But imagine in the US, it was just a number of people who didn't even know what was going on in the election. They were charged for trying to subvert the elections because they were in a room with somebody who was discussing this. And they have either been charged and either gotten jail term or the cases are ongoing. Here we have documented cases of people forging documents. Mingo, Lowenfield, forging, reducing numbers of voters by 175,000 votes unilaterally. And we're having a hard time getting it done. And you talk about administration of justice, the sloth is unbelievable. And so if Nigel Lewis is concerned about the sloth, I am too. I'm concerned, even more concerned about the sloth, because these people should have been convicted based on what the evidence that is there already. Should have been languishing in jail. I'm concerned about the sloth too, about in the administration of justice. But I don't know what they said to the Democrats and the Congressional Black Caucus, who are very strong on making sure that the people who try to steal the elections in the US, they're prosecuted. I hope that they spoke about Mingo and what is happening here. So, Cathy, you said the caucus and the others deem it troubling and worrisome, their statements, what they said. I'm not going to go about undermining democracy. Norton was a bit more truthful. When he gave that interview, Norton said, one, the people said that there are two sides to a coin. When they presented their report, the people they met from Congress, I don't know where, because I haven't seen the pictures. Normally you would see the pictures coming out like when President Ali was there, but obviously they met somebody from Congress. I don't know if in the corridor or pictures, but wherever they met them, and if they met them, Norton was truthful to say, when we told them about these issues, we were told that there are two sides to a coin. So that sounds like people who are balanced and want to find out about other issues, because no doubt they found them to be complainers, gripers. And then, I don't know who, if it was Amanza Walton again, or who said, oh, we were told to provide evidence. Now this is like people are, like a lot of wild accusations, and people are just tired of it, and they said, you just give us the evidence of it. Because you come here, walk in with your hand and making all these accusations, get the evidence. And their big evidence was Doreen Best. That was one of their star evidence of PPP discrimination. The same man who was charged for extortion here and who was a fugitive in the US. So it was a failure, a total failure as far as I'm concerned. But it's sad for me to look at it. You know, sometimes, because we're Guyanese together, and when people make a fool of themselves, whether they're from APNU Abroad, I feel a little way about it. I feel a little way that people, because somehow they say this about all of us, these are clowns from Guyana or something like that. And I don't want that impression of our people. But it was a clown show, a full-fledged clown show up there, pathetic, sad, and I don't know how they could allow themselves to be dragged into this and now be lectured to by Burke. There were the children there, and he was in charge of the conference. He's a con man. This guy is a professional con man. And they allowed a whole party to be conned. And by the way, how come they didn't have the $2.4 million Guyana dollars to hold their Congress? I wonder how they got up to the U.S. That would be interesting to find who funded their trip, because they can't hold their Congress. Norton said, pleaded poverty, that people didn't want to give them money because Jagdeo tell them not to give them money. But I dealt with that already, that nobody wants to support them because, one, they don't have any prospects of coming into office. Two, that they did a terrible job where they not just extorted businessmen, but the environment for business and development and growth here was zero. They were lecturing people. So who wants a party like that to return to office? People are not going to give you money to do that. By the way, Norton said again, repeated, that they had a plan. Now, for a leader of the opposition, this is like, I can't imagine this. The leader of opposition saying they have a plan to change Guyana, but they were unprepared to unveil it there at the conference. But they haven't done so even in Guyana, the plan, that they have a plan to do that. He goes to the IMF, he talks a lot of nonsense I see there, because the IMF assessment of the economy is done on the basis of economics. Economics, not politics. He goes to tell them that, oh no, the PPP is not spending enough on some issue, some pet project of his. If he goes to the wrong people to complain, because if anything, they're even more fiscally conservative than we are, and we are considered fiscally conservative because of the knowing the long-term effects and almost the immediate effects of an expansionary fiscal policy on exchange rate stability and inflation. So that's why we have to manage this way. And so he goes there. But can somebody say to him, he's keeping this plan, their plan for the oil and gas industry secret until, because PPP might copy it, up to 2020. When 2025, he's keeping this national development plan that they have. The fact is they have nothing, and this and that is why he's saying that, because he's afraid that if he unveils something, we will tear it apart, because you will see how unsustainable it is, based on what his public utterances have been. Now, no plan. This brings me to GPL. So Patterson says, no plan. We didn't have a plan for GPL. Now, I'm not going to, because the ministers in charge of this sector have been dealing with this issue. And also, I spoke at the opening of the mall across the river. I dealt with it. The president did a live explaining a lot of the issues here. But I thought that we should respond a bit because they're very convenient about this issue. They're very convenient on No matter, that's okay. I don't really need it, thanks. So we pointed out that at this point in time, the demand for electricity far exceeds our capacity to supply it. That's a fact. The demand came about, the increase in demand came about because of several things. Expansion of business, but that's more long term. New houses, new business, one. Two, in the heat wave that we have now, a lot more people are using air conditioning systems, etc. So we've seen the demand go up. And then thirdly, this is the biggest worry, a lot of people who are privately generating power have decided to switch to GPL. And why did they do that? So in 2014, in about 2014, 2015, the price, early 2015, the price of fuel came down from over $100 a barrel, $120 a barrel, to about $28 a barrel. It plunged. As a result of which, APNU saved on the balance of payment alone in the period that they were in office over $350 million in fuel imports, lower fuel imports. That is because of the lower prices. They didn't immediately pass the benefit on to people. So what they did, they accumulated nearly $30 billion in GPL. And if you go back to my press conferences as leader of the opposition, I was saying that they should pass on the benefits of a lower fuel import to the consumers, because they accumulated the money, they were accumulating vast sums of money in GPL because their costs had reduced significantly. So over time, so the prices were 22 cents per kilowatt hour, around there. Then the price started going up back. So the prices are close to $100. It fluctuates, but nearly $100 a barrel. That's for crude. But when you look at refined products, it's a little bit more. So instead of, we didn't want to pass this on. If we pass on the higher prices of fuel import costs, then we'd have to change the tariff from 22 cents, push it up back. So we said, no, we're going to keep the electricity prices the same as with the old fuel rates. We're going to subsidize. So every capital cost that you see that GPL invests in, they invest in a lot of equipment and transmission, all comes from the government as subsidy. They don't have to take any revenue to deal with their capital costs. So it's heavily subsidized. So, but the prices for fuel are high. We then remove the taxes too. We move the taxes from 50% down to zero, the excise tax, to keep the fuel prices. So right now, fuel prices are zero taxes. We don't collect any taxes from fuel. It was 50%, it's zero, because we wanted it, we didn't want the price to escalate steeply, push up cost of living and transport costs and everything, cost of production. So that's the situation now. So if I have to self-generate now, and the price of fuel goes up, then that means my cost will be more than 22 cents, it's subsidized per kilowatt hour. So it makes sense for a lot of people who are self-generating to turn off their generators now, who were generating in the past, and come on to the grid, the GPL grid, including the big users. So they have now flooded over to the grid because they're getting subsidized electricity from the grid. So that has pushed up the demand. So when we looked at this, we said, when we look at the difference between installed capacity and demand, we have to take off about 28 to 30,000 people per night in the peak hours, only the peak hours. In the afternoon, I think about 2 to 3, that's a peak, and then in the night again from about 6:30 to 9 or so. Those are peak hours when the demand goes up significantly because most people turn on at that time. So we said, come off in these hours, go back to your old gen sets. A lot of them don't want to come off because they're getting the subsidized power. And then we said we will add a premium tariff, only for those hours that you're off. So it forces you off because you'll have to pay more. But we heard that some of them are still not coming off because they're passing on the cost to their consumers or someone else. So GPL has decided to take them off because the alternative is, should we discomfort 15 or 20 business who are using large amounts of power, who can self-generate, who are getting subsidized power still for maybe 20 hours a day, and they only have to come off in the peak? Or should we discomfort 30,000 people, where you have small users? And we have opted to say, you got to come off. You're still getting a lot of benefits from the system by getting 20 hours a day, lower electricity costs than you would have had to pay if you were self-generating. And we said, we're buying some additional capacity, nearly 30 megawatts, which will come in December, where we'll be able to supply everyone back. So at that time, you don't have to come off in the peak hours. And we said that once the gas to energy project comes on stream, that's 300 megawatts, then all of this issue would be solved. Because then the power price, we'd have more people coming onto the grid because it wouldn't be 22 cents per kilowatt hour. It will then be 11 cents per kilowatt hour because once that plant is built, we'd go even half of the price. So at that time, you have to anticipate everyone will come onto the grid who are self-generating, big, small, everyone, because of the lower prices. So that is it. Now, how did we get here? So that's the question, and so it's become political. How did we get here? So I see Patterson saying, oh, they had a plan. Now, this is what the flyer that they put out. Have they lost it? You realize the president and VP have finally lost it. So listen to the key part of their plan. All the projects below were conceived and commenced under the APNU AFC government. The Kingdom of Norway was so impressed with the coalition administration's energy diversification program that they immediately committed to use some of the 80 million previously set aside for the short-sighted Amila Falls Hydro to construct 3 by 10 solar farms, 1.5 hybrid solar power for Wakanam, 1 megawatt for Leg 1, 4 megawatts for Fort Wellington, etc., and four substations. Now, this is what they said. So first of all, I would be ashamed to say this, because this 80 million there that they're talking about, that Norway was so impressed with, is 80 million that we earn under the low carbon development strategy, and we placed it through the IDB, in the IDB, for use for the hydropower that Ramjatan and Katius and many others wrote Norway saying they should not give to the government of Guyana in that period, in the early I think about 2011 or somewhere around that period. They were opposed to this. So imagine that Norway was so impressed with them that Norway agreed to use the money that the PPP left in the IDB to fund the expansion of the project. So that's the first point, shamelessly talking about this. Now the fact is that Norway was not impressed at all. After they killed the hydro, saying that they mentioned short-sighted, they killed the hydro, Norway commissioned a study by North Consult and said that the best option for Guyana was the hydro. And you have a copy of that study. Everyone has a copy of that study. So another lie here. In this small flyer, another lie here. Norway actually said the best option is the hydropower, and you should go back to doing this, that they killed unreasonably. Then the third thing, you heard what they said, that they conceive, not that they put it in place. So we don't have the 30 megawatts of solar as yet. They conceived it. So in the 5 years, this was all conceptual work that they had in 5 years. So common sense is, if you have any brain, people would understand. If the hydro was supposed to bring in 165 megawatts of new power, I have a long list of how old these units are because we put them in the Wärtsilä units from the time we got into office. If we had 165 megawatts of new power, our total demand now, like, is about 100 and something megawatts, 175 or so. Just imagine 165 megawatts new power. All of these units that we had, the old units, would have gone into reserve. So when you have like periods of increase in demand, you then bring in your reserves. You can then use the older units as reserve. Now we are using the old units as the base load, the primary one, because there was no base load, new base load power. No new power plant. But it's common sense. So we end up using all of these because they killed the hydro. They didn't bring in. So when Patterson talks about this, doesn't know about lag effect. If you didn't bring in new power, you're talking about 3 by 10. He upgraded a couple of transmission lines. They conceptualized using our money that we left for solar, which we've just gone to tender for now. What did they do with base load stations? So he's saying, why you're buying these reconditioned units. These reconditioned units have to keep us going so that we don't over-invest. We can now, if we buy a big power plant or we go to buy long-term arrangements for power and lock in at 10 cents per kilowatt hour, and we have our 300 megawatts coming on stream in about a year and a half, then you're stuck 20 years with a power purchase agreement at 10 cents per kilowatt hour. The average cost will be much higher than what we want to sell to people. So that is why we are buying these units now, to allow us to get to that period when this new big base load comes in, 300 megawatts of new power in the system, and all the existing units that we have in the country, well, in the interconnected grid, they go into reserves. So we have another 100 and something megawatts in reserves. So in case anything goes wrong, you just bring in the reserve. Right now we have 0 reserve. We're using the old units as base load that we put in place because they didn't, in the 5 years, didn't make no investment decision. And the one investment decision we were going to make that would have solved the problem, they killed it, which is the hydro. How could you be so stupid and short-sighted and say you had a plan? This was their plan. He fixed a couple of transmission lines. Look at this nonsense. Took the money, conceptualized bringing in these things and all of that. And it's a lie. Nothing about 1.5 for Wakkanam. The Wakkanam system is funded from, I think, a grant from the UAE. I don't even want to go through the components of it because it's pure nonsense. And they put this out as a flyer. And he talks about this plan they had. And every step of the way, they have sought to diminish, to kill our ability to solve this problem. Look at the trouble we're getting to put that gas to energy project in place. Today, a court decision was issued against a group closely aligned with the opposition, extremist group that's trying to block the project. And today the court ruled on the environmental impact studies that were done. Just today, throughout their case. Every day, somebody trying to block this, but then they would duplicitously, Glenn Lal and Patterson would say, oh, you're blackouts. But when we're trying to deal with a project that will end the blackout, instead of supporting it, they try to run it down all the time. I saw another nonsense group talking about GPL underestimating demand and all of that. That's peripheral to what we need. We need, in the future, the pace of growth, the 300 megawatts, when everyone come on the stream will go quickly. We're going out back for the hydro. We may have to plan another 150 megawatts as soon as we complete this one. This is not an easy project to do. Just to build the system to receive it, apart from the NGL facility, the transmission means, not just the transformers, the substations to distribute all 300 megawatts of power, the control center, is a major overhaul of the electricity sector, bringing in renewables through the solar. I don't want to speak much about the entire plan here, but this, when you have people like Patterson and the others lying to the people of this country. Glenn Lal saying that the heat wave now in Guyana is caused by PPP, the ExxonMobil in Guyana. Can you imagine that, the heat wave going around the world? We caused this. And he wouldn't give support so we could tackle the heat wave by getting this project done so people would have clean power and they would have not fluctuating power, they would have cheaper power and reliable power and in abundant quantities, which that project will supply. But this is what's going on. There are a couple of things that I wanted just on the oil and gas side to deal with. There was one editorial in Stabroek which speaks about, I think it was September 23rd, about the bungle auction. So I think clearly the person who wrote this needs to read back again what's going on around the world. They're complaining that we didn't get such a great response to our auction. So they should ask themselves the question, if the same question that is being portrayed on a daily basis, if what we have offshore is so valuable, why wouldn't, and it's a money maker, like Glenn Lal, this can solve. If you get back the 120 blocks which he's coming up with, I don't know about this 120 blocks, but I think he is talking about the relinquishment from the Exxon, their 20% relinquishment, that will pay double the salaries for all the teachers. So I don't know how a relinquishment back to the government will generate enough revenue to pay teachers, because it's back with the government. When you put it out to auction, not everybody is taking it now to explore. But this is the stupid warp logic. So on one hand, they're saying these are all very valuable things, the government not taking enough, etc. And then on the other hand, some people don't want it because it's coming out, the auction are there. We only have this number of auction, 8 of the 14, where there means the 6 others, there are no interest in them. So it's not as simple as that. Secondly, the fact It says neither reason can stand up. When it comes to, so they were talking about our argument here that globally there are limited exploration dollars and a lot of competing countries. And therefore, you have to remain competitive. We believe we're competitive, even with our new fiscal regime, and because of the large number of discoveries here. But even with that, we didn't have all of the blocks subscribed to. And some of the reason may be because we did not, as I said before, we didn't go to do, from a government side, invest in 3D seismic work. We auctioned them as is with the existing data. So they're saying, oh, that can't stand up to reason, because look at what has happened. When it comes to the president's reply, a Wood Mackenzie report stated that the global oil and gas exploration sector had its strongest year in 2022 in more than a decade. So if you check the trend, they have to go back and examine the trend. This is not like a gaffe. You got to look at the trend. The majors, the oil majors, are selling off a lot of their upstream assets, exploration and everything else. A lot of them, that's the trend. This year, they're spending a bit more on exploration, but largely because of what is happening in the US and the UK. The US has just given licenses to explore in the US. The UK has issued 100 licenses. The same countries that lecture us, they're now going to explore more in those countries. So they support our point, but can draw the conclusion that there are more people now, there's greater competition for exploration dollars globally. There's greater competition. I don't know, it's a backward the kind of analysis here. And I don't even want to continue with it, but really the person who wrote this editorial needs to just understand what is going on. You can't have the cane, preserve the cane, and then want to suck it too at the same time. This is what's happening. Argument that, oh, it's so great here, we have all of the thing, everybody wants to come here. And when you put out the auctions where people can bid in an open system and they don't come, you say, oh, we didn't do so well on the auction. Why didn't we do so well? Because there are real reasons, global. You're not just in the narrow confines of I saw this thing Gaisuko saying that Central Housing and Planning Authority does not own Mucka lands from which residents were evicted. That is the Mara waves. I don't know Gaisuko, where Gaisuko got this, and they need to re-examine their advice over there. But if you recall, in 2017 or 2018, if you go and look at the vesting order, the NISIL vesting order, where Gaisuko's assets were transferred to the government, you will see that all the lands, not just the estates in Demerara, but all the lands in the county of Demerara owned by Gaisuko or in which they had rights in or any other thing were transferred by the vesting order. So they gotta really clean up their act over at Gaisuko there. Now I'm going to end by Glenalias about the teacher's story again, promising all these promises, the teachers and stuff like that. So GTU has been telling a lot of lies to the teachers. I know what's happening. We need a thorough investigation. I said to the president and others that we need to investigate the hundreds of duty-free concessions that were given to the GTU. Hundreds, literally hundreds. When I was president, We had this multi-year agreement. Every year they were going to get 100 duty-free vehicles for teachers. And the mistake I probably made was to allow the GTU to administer it, to choose who got this. And it's not only, from what I'm hearing, it's not only friends and family, but a corrupt system. It was used to enhance the image and well-being of some of the other people in the leadership of GTU, and some were sold. So there's a lot of things. We had put together a housing fund here for them too, and the GTU leadership, they didn't seem too interested in those matters. So there are lots of things we have to examine in that leadership there. And I see the last thing they wanted was the teachers talking directly to the president, because they're engaged in a healthy dose of suppression. And so people don't get to bring their matters directly to the policymakers. And as the president said, he is available to meet with anyone. Now, on the question of the audit, I saw Sabrick Musa's counting. Last Thursday was a holiday, so the report did not get to go to the cabinet. I left the cabinet. A report was submitted by the minister. The report was being discussed when I left the cabinet. If the discussions are ongoing, I will go back for those discussions now. But as soon as that matter is completed at the cabinet level, I guess the president will address it. But the report has been submitted to the cabinet, and the discussions started earlier before I came here. And we're taking it seriously. Yes.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo. And I stand up because I know you can't see me at the back here. We'll do short. For an update on this Chinese landing report. You said the report was submitted, would be made public soon. Any timeline on the...
As I said before, the minister responsible has indicated that the report will be out too. I don't know if it's on their website now. Can you please check with her, Geltisher? Because a lot of these things, I don't want to bring them to my... I'm verifying more of this stuff now before I speak.
Question is on the oil and gas sector. Dr. Jagdeo, in opposition, your party heavily criticized the coalition for not having ring fencing in the Scarborough Block PSA, settling for low royalties. My question is...
the ring fencing again. Boy, somebody needs to explain to Glenn Lal what ring fencing is. I don't think this man really understands, and he gets you to come here every time to talk about this ring fencing. I know it must be tough for you too, because he's probably watching, and if you don't raise it, you might get into trouble. But this man seriously does not understand. We have spoken on that issue 100 times. Please tell him to stop misleading people about ring fencing. He's lying and get people repeating he can get 12 million if Jagdeo ring fence the 2016 agreement and all of that. It's a bunch of lies, and he does this with a certainty that is amazing. I think in ignorance you can do that. When you're totally ignorant and you don't know anything. So I'm not dealing with ring fencing again. I dealt with that 100 times. You know I would have given you this answer. You know that. So let's move on.
It's not a question, sir. If you want to call it a Glenn Law question, at least give it a year.
No. But no, I dealt with ring fencing. Anything to do with ring fencing, no more. I've dealt with it 100 times before. Ring fencing. That's it. Anything to do with that.
The next question is about the protests. How do you respond to those folks that have been marching in front of the president's office?
Which folks?
The folks. You know very well what I'm speaking about.
Which folks? Which folks have been marching?
A bunch of folks from Essequibo, Barbies, Glenlal was there too.
Oh, Glenlal was there too.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So how do you respond?
Glenlal has a he has a democratic right in this country to protest, to march, wherever he wishes. He doesn't have a democratic right to lie to people and mislead them, and that is what he is doing. So when he does that, I will defend his right to protest, but I will expose his lies to the people. So he has a right to protest.
So what do you think about his call for the government to rescind the extension? The relinquishment?
We've dealt with that already. I dealt with that already.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Jagdeo, can you say if Exxon is interested in purchasing Guyana's carbon credits?
We raised this matter with them. They have not been positively inclined to do that.
Does a big company like Exxon not being interested, or they not having an interest, say something about the quality of the carbon credits?
No. The consortium is made up of several owners, co-venturers. One of the co-venturers in that consortium bought $750 million worth of carbon credits because of their quality, and at a price that is several times multiple of the voluntary market, the price for similar credits traded in the voluntary markets, because there is no formal compliance market for this. So if you extend that, every business or every person has their own business model. Exxon says they're investing in carbon capture and storage, and therefore that's their contribution to the fight against climate change. I'm not defending them, because I think they should do more globally and here. So they have indicated, by the way, that they are prepared to invest in other things, mangrove and reforestation and all of that. And so we have a different conversation. So I don't see it as anything. Globally, we're recognized as the best quality forest carbon. So it doesn't matter. If we have had interest from a number of people, we're being very cautious before we sell the additional 70%. Exxon is not the barometer or the litmus test for the quality of our carbon credit. But coming back to the issue, a co-venture of theirs has bought it's the largest purchase of forest carbon anywhere in the world, including in Brazil or Indonesia or any of the other countries that have substantially bigger forests than ours.
So will the government reach out back to Exxon, or reach out?
No, because not on this issue. We're not begging Exxon to buy our credit. Our credit is competitive. We're looking for the best deal. So if Exxon comes along, changes its mind, and comes along with an offer that is good, then or compete any other offer, they could participate. If they don't, then we will go with the higher offer. But it's up to them. We're not begging Exxon to buy our carbon.
Good afternoon, sir. Davina Bagat with Kaitor News. I have a few questions. Firstly, sir, the Ministry of Natural Resources recently invited bids for the sale of Guyana's crude,
marketing.
right, from Liza 1 and 2. But I was wondering why nothing, he didn't invite tenders, well, for people to market or crude from Payara as well, given that it's expected to start up by year end. Can you?
Yeah, well, I guess it's the startup, so you may have to, because of the startup, it's not available as yet, because we hope that we conclude. The contract will expire shortly. From what I'm told, it's about, the contract will expire very soon for the existing marketing arrangement. So they would probably have to get that and then go out, when Payara comes on stream, go out separately for another request for proposal.
Okay, sir. Secondly, I'm seeking an update on the funding for the gas to energy project. I know President Ali was in the U.S. recently. Can you say if the loan has been approved?
President Ali met with the president of Exim Bank, and really good discussions. It's moving forward. It's moving apace.
I was wondering if this would have, given that it's not approved as yet, if it's going to have any sort of impact on the timeline for the project.
No, it's not going to. It's not going to. And we can always have, because it's a timing issue when it comes on. It will happen. It will happen. If there is need for, we can have bridge financing until that loan comes on stream. And from what I gather, their loan can fund retroactive expenditure. So if you have bridge financing, then you can go back and clear it easily once the loan comes on stream.
Okay, and on the Amila Falls project you referenced earlier, can you say how soon?
We're hoping within maybe maximum 2 weeks to go back for the request for proposal. We've been doing, up to last week, we had another interest from a Brazilian company. We've had a company from Austria. We had several from Korea. So now I think there's a big, large number of people approaching us. And the best way to do this is through a public process, an auction. Well, not an auction, a request for proposal, a bid process.
Any indication as to how soon, maybe next 2 weeks, next month?
Yeah, I just said latest 2 weeks, the way I see it, because they have to update. What they have is the data, right? So the instructions have been given already to the technical people. What they have to do is to update the data from the last request for proposal, and there are some elements like the change in demand and all of that. So, but we had most of the documents from the past already, so we just need to update them to see that they're more up to date.
And as we're on the energy sector, there are concerns that there may be an overstated amount from GPL in terms of our ability to utilize all this power. Can you speak to that?
I don't understand. Overstated on what? That's the same study you're talking about that some lady referred to. But say, overstated in what? Like?
Okay, so it says that GPL has sort of inflated our estimated power demands, and given that we're going after so many projects to increase our capacity, the thinking is
overestimate. In fact, I think they underestimated. Because when we went through, one time they had a presentation and we went through the formula. And when we look at the demand from the massive, so anybody who is coming in from abroad and tell you they can estimate it, some consultant, looking at what GPL has done, they gotta be crazy. A consultant doesn't work that way. Half of these consultants come and pick the brains of local people. So you have to come here and you have to understand what the development plan is. That's how you estimate demand. So one big component of demand will be all of those who are generating, self-generating, who will switch to the government, to the GPL now. So it was estimated that over 100 megawatts was being self-generated. So if you have, we're supplying from GPL, say 180 megawatts, they switch, that's about 280 megawatts. So that's one. So when you lower prices, you have an explosion in demand because the law of economics. If something is cheaper, people consume more AC, etc. So that's a big component of demand, the next component. The third has to do the expansion now in the industry. We have 7 new hotels under construction, potentially another 4 hotels coming up soon. That's about maybe 15 megawatts of power alone that they will need. That's about 15 megawatts alone. If you sit in Washington and you don't know about these hotels, or you don't know about the 100,000 houses that will be built, or how many hospitals, the 12 hospitals that would need large amounts of power, how can you then anecdotally say, oh, it's overestimating? You have to go through an iterative process and almost calculate it, investment by investment. So you can't sit abroad. That's what these consultants, the same Thompson, Zillow or whatever, Zanzillow, he is the one who said we don't even need roads here. Why are you spending your money on from the sovereign wealth fund? Save it all. These are the people who call themselves consultants. And therefore, it's only through an iterative arrangement that you can come up with a big estimate of demand. So what if we overbuild a bit? What if we have extra power than we need now? So we overestimate the demand by 20 or 50 megawatts, and that happens. One, the gas to energy, some of these big projects alone for the gas side, we will need massive amounts of power. If we want to do the alumina plant, to move bauxite down from, say, Linden, or take the power up to Linden and do it there, which would be probably the ideal thing to do. That alone may need 100 megawatts of power. The alumina plant, to move back to processing our bauxite. They could be, it's utter nonsense. So that story, that's why I didn't pay too much attention. You can always get these consultants who sit abroad and think they know what's going on in our country. It has to be a detailed sort of thing. Yeah, did I leave out something?
Oh, I think that's it. You covered it. Yeah.
I forgot to mention there. Let me say that the world is also, because I just want you to read up a bit about this, since you're interested, that the EU is soon putting in a carbon border tax, basically, adjustment mechanism, CVAM. So when that happens, if you export into the European Union, they would calculate, their importers would have to calculate the carbon content of your products. And if there is a difference between your carbon content and it's not being penalized or paid for its externalities, and that of the European Union producers in the same sector who are part of the EU ETS, the emissions trading scheme, they will then put an adjuster rate. So when that comes in, it might force countries who are exporting into the the EU, to put a cap and trade system or a carbon tax in their countries. Because if you don't do it, when your product goes there, the EU collects the money instead of you. If you tax it here, they see their comparable payment for the externalities, then there's no adjustment tariff over there. So that is going to drive a lot of capital, the cap and trade system or carbon tax markets around the world for countries particularly exporting into the EU. So if Exxon and the others are doing that, going to export their products into the EU, there may be need for reconfiguration here on some issues too that we have not discussed as yet. Let's see how it evolves globally. So it's a complexity. Coming back to you now. Yes, sorry, I just remember that.
Okay, thank you, sir. The Bank of Guyana recently reported that government is likely to approve the 6th project by year end. Can you say if government is indeed focused on handing out the approval within this time frame?
Yes, so talk to the ministry, but they have hired, I think, all the consultants already. They're working.
And, sir, concerns have been raised. I'm not sure if you addressed this before, but concerns have been raised regarding the short period in which an FDP review is completed in Guyana. Can you comment on this?
I don't think it's a short period. It's a quality. The ministry has been having discussions on these issues long before they come up. We know what their plans are. Exxon has not been shy about saying how many FPSOs they want and how many projects. So it's the quality of the review I'm concerned about. Quality of the review. And I'm convinced that our licenses and environmental permits are world standard permits and licenses. So it's the quality I'm concerned about. So we are interested too in ensuring that we don't have a protracted period for the sake of having a protracted period to say we've been at this for a year. It's a quality. Go ahead. Last one.
Finally for me, sir, and I'm not sure again if you have addressed this in the past, but some citizens believe that the unfair competition with Exxon enjoying this free tax right and so on has caused little interest.
That's a Glenlal one. That's a Glenlal.
Has caused little interest from the oil companies in this auction that we recently had. What are your thoughts?
That has nothing to do with it's an old Glenlal issue. And you know what? Let me say this to you, and it's not meant. So when you go back to the papers, Glenlal used to complain about all the concessions we were giving to Rusal in the Berbice River. So I did an interview. I think you left the interview early. Kiana had to walk out. I don't know if she walked out, but I think a mosquito flew in her eye. And she left the interview early, although the interview was supposed to be with her. So he said, oh, you're giving away all the concessions, the government with these mining contracts. And by the way, now the large mining agreements are public, or they're public. Kaichor was asking for them all along. We made them public. They're in the public domain. So he said, all these concessions to foreigners. So I said to him, listen, we will give you all that they get. We'll give you even more, anything you ask for. We don't want any taxes from this area. You just find an investor that will preserve 1,000 jobs in Kwakwani and Aichuni because our people there need these jobs. You just find the person. You bring them now and we will give them. You can do it or anyone else. So you don't have to worry we're giving out too much. We're prepared to give even more. But just we want the jobs there. Up to today, nothing. That area, the people walk away. Now we don't have jobs in the area because they're left. So this is the perspective. A lot of people complain, oh, too much taxes, tax breaks, etc., to these investors. But the same thing with the auction. If the auction, it was so lucrative, why couldn't you come up with a consortium or some group, like one Guyanese group has done, to put in a bid? And then they will make a lot of money too. But it doesn't represent the way you do business and the risk. It's good to anecdotally talk about these things, how people getting too much concession, they're doing this, they're doing that. But it's not about anecdotes, it's about real people and real lives. And we can't be playing around with that. Yes, please.
Hi, Vishani from the newsroom. Just two quick questions from me. Last week you spoke about taxing those big users on the grid. I just wanted to know, now given what GPL is doing, taking them off the grid, was any business taxed, and how did they respond to the move to potentially tax them and now to move them off of the grid?
So GPL has been having a conversation with the users. That was the first line of engagement, to talk to them to see if they will come off voluntarily. The first set of conversations failed. Then we said, can we incentivize them to come off the grid only in these peak hours? So I hope that the context is given too. As I explained earlier, they're still on the grid most of the day except the peak hours for the purpose, basically because that's when we need the additional power. So we said, how can we incentivize people? But we already remove all the taxes. They pay zero now on their fuel. So we said we could have reduced the taxes on the fuel. It's zero though. So they're already getting a lot of incentives here. Then GPL reported back no movement. So we said we may have to put in for the peak period for big users above a certain level. So not all big users, just no. So the stores on Regent Street and all of those, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the massive users, some of the malls and stuff like that. They use a lot and they have generating capacity. So we said, let us put in this tax that only for the peak hours, that will go beyond, so it will be a little punitive measure against them. You know, they would want to voluntarily come off the grid because they'd have to pay a bit more. That doesn't work too. That's the report from GPL. So they have now had to resort last night to taking some of them off. And they said last night, the report I got was the generation was close to the demand, but there might have been a small feeder in Kingston that they had to take off. So I'm hoping, because I'm trying, it's not my sector, but at least it worries us too. It bothers me. I can understand people. You know, I have a generator, but I go around the country and I know how it feels. I've been fighting against blackouts all the time. Partisan talks. I held press conferences outside my yard, outside my office on the afternoon, in the yard at the leader of the opposition. I know how it harms people. You buy your food, you buy your meat, you put it in your fridge, and then blackout. People can't watch TV, they can't, their whole lives change, everything. Now the kids are on devices and all of that. So we can understand it. We empathize with people. But so we had to do, and that's why we opted. It was a choice we had. Should we keep these 15 persons on, or for the hour, or take that down?
And my follow-up is, those 15 massive users, are you able to say how much power they
No, I wouldn't.
alone?
Not here. I would. That's why I said it's not my sector, but I have an interest in what goes on because we are concerned about people, and so you can talk with greater detail. You can maybe talk to Minister Indar or the others.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo, Guyana Wilbur Kaicher News. Can you say if Exxon has been formally notified of having to relinquish the 20% of the Kanji block?
No, the Kanji block. Yes, which Kaichor or Kanji? Kanji. No.
There was an issue where Kaichor is under special circumstances.
Right, yes. So Kanji, yes, they have. That was in the newspaper already, though. You reported that.
No, we reported that you said 20% will be relinquished this year, but Exxon was not notified as yet. So I'm just following up if they have been notified.
I don't, but they're involved in Kanji and Kaichor,
Yes,
Exxon, as operators.
yes.
They have exited. Exxon has relinquished
Kaichor,
Kaichor.
but they're still in Kanji.
They in Kanji, as the last time I spoke with you, the Kaichor one we were talking about. No, they have not. I don't know if we had from the public domain and from interactions that they've had. Some time ago they were talking about this. They have not done so formally. Maybe they're reassessing. They have not done so. That was my last report. They have not on Kanji. Kaichor, they walked away.
Your previous press conference that you're responsible for oversight, policy, whilst the Minister of Natural Resources is tasked with the day-to-day management of the oil and gas industry, as well as the implementation. But we have not had a press conference and his petroleum unit explaining to us what has been some of the challenges, the accomplishments over the 3-year
so
period.
I agree with that. Somehow there's a feeling that I tell them not to have this press conference because that was what maybe in the public domain. I don't have, the more they do in that regard, then it's easier for me to deal with the policy. So I don't have to routine issues deal with like, is there a letter sent? Because I don't, that's not my job, the letter sent. I'm saying that the policy is moving forward. So the more that is done, the more information they supply. That's why I keep saying on your website, you have to get up-to-date info. So I have no objection whatsoever to that happening. In fact, it would be helpful. So when I come here, I just deal with policy issues.
So that is something you would encourage Minister
That I have
Bharrat
absolutely no objection to that, because some people think, you know, in this country, everything that goes wrong, or with some people, they think I'm blocking it or I'm doing it, like in some quarters. So, but it's not so.
Okay, and since you mentioned the website, the petroleum management website has some outdated information on where wells have been drilled. There's missing drilling information. There's sporadic data on our blocks. Do you think that this is something that ought to be rectified?
That is the thing. And so I didn't want to say this now because I just have to mention it to the president too. But so what I'm doing, I'm recruiting someone, it would be done soon, to look at, remember we said there are two approaches. So we will deal with better contract administration / renegotiation. We believe we have addressed that issue in the public domain. That was in the party manifesto. We have dealt with I'm not going to come back and list them again, but we have completed the major reforms that we had outlined in the manifesto. The same ones again, NRF, the local content law, we have done our auction, we have passed the new PSA, the new petroleum activities bill, that's done. So I need now, we are moving closer to monitoring, which I said again, monitoring of the activities. So I want now to see how under every provision of the existing PSA, what are the requirements from Exxon to supply data, how they strengthened, how that fits in with all of the new licenses that we have issued, because we've strengthened some of those provisions. Although we didn't amend the PSA, the provisions in the license have strengthened the need to supply data, to see how all of that is being complied with. and whether from the ministry's perspective, we have a system not just to ensure that timely data are submitted or the oil and gas operators comply with the terms of their PSAs, but also whether we have an internal system in place within the ministry to, once the data comes in, not just to sit on it, but to productively ensure that it's receiving attention. Because often, some of the issues we've had in the past is that it seems as though it comes in a diffuse fashion, and by the time it gets around, we have slowed in exercising our agreements under or the rights under the agreement. And this has happened, well, you saw the confusion over some of the relinquishment dates and the letters being written. So I'm commissioning that now, so then we can build a system to ensure that those things don't happen. And this is when I met with the GGMC and everyone else. So that is how we'll move forward in making sure that we're up to speed and we have a bureaucracy that operates in a manner that is not a maverick manner, but in a systemic way. Not a systemic, but a systems way to address issues of monitoring and all of that of the sector, the PSA.
Two final matters for me. Christopher Ram made an observation in a letter published by Starbrook News that the 460 pre-contract costs might be overstated by 92 million, and he has urged government to have its auditors look into this. Is this something that government is looking into?
So, again, what I've been saying all along, the government contracted IHS Markit, the last government, to do this study, the audit. Audit was submitted to us. It's been languishing for a while. It was sent to GRA. GRA makes the final call. They have now said to us, they wrote on August 8 to say, deal with this at the 214. If the GRA believes that that is the case, then we will, whatever decision they make, advice that the GRA gives us, we'll pursue. Not as politicians. Not as politicians. I've said this over and over again, that we, the politicians, must stay away from the audit. In this case, it's the technical engagements that got us into trouble that we've had, and we need to make sure that that happens. So I'm open to anything, provided that the GRA assesses and then they advise.
Finally, sir, can you give us an update on the evaluation of the bids for the oil blocks? How is that coming along?
Oh, I don't have a report, but they are supposed to finish this by next week. They said, remember the timeline that the ministry put out? They said early October that they will complete the evaluation. So I don't know exactly where they are with that.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo, Kemal King from Oil Now. Do you anticipate, with respect to the auction, that with the timelines that were put out by the government, that you'll be able to stick to those timelines with respect to evaluating negotiations and awards of oil blocks?
When the timelines were developed, they were developed in discussions with the consultants. So I guess there's adequate timeline. There adequate time in that timeline to complete all of these. I can't tell you definitively now, because if it gets more complex in the negotiations or there's slippage, that it will be completed within that timeline, but I anticipate that this will happen.
Okay, with respect to the Payara project, According to government's intelligence, do you have perhaps a date or month for the timeline for first oil from that project?
No government intelligence. When I don't know if they, what's your intelligence? I want to know. I don't want to speculate again, because the way is that if I give you based on government intelligence and 1 week goes past, you would see a headline: Jagdeo, the Exxon juke the PPP again, that this is so. Let me don't speculate. Not an intelligence. What about your intelligence? When did they tell you?
I don't know.
Now has more intelligence we have. You have no more with the oil and gas companies.
On the farm out of the Kaieteur block by ExxonMobil and Hess, could you talk about perhaps whether the government has approved yet their application to exit the block, the Kaieteur block, and what are your policy considerations for the future of the Kaieteur block?
So they have, I think we are in the public domain already as saying this, that them exiting as the operator and also as a shareholder in the block leaves the block with the remaining 2 shareholders, but they now have to write us to notify about the reconfiguration of the ownership and the operator, right? So I think the issue in their press release that ECO will be the new operator. Ratio will be the new operator. So that is a process that has to be done. Whether that has been done, I don't track it on a ball-to-ball, day-to-day basis, but you can get that easily if they've done that. But there is enough time remaining in the block for them, even with the reconfiguration, we believe, to complete their work program.
Okay, so why I asked the question was that, first of all, Exxon had originally applied to drill 12 wells at the Kaieteur block. So having 2 companies, ExxonMobil and Hess, these large U.S. companies leaving the block, are you concerned about, the company has said, for example, Ratio, who's going to be the new operator, that they want to bring in new partners?
So the obligations under the prospecting license might be different than what the company applies for. So the obligation might be 1 well or 2 wells in the area that they have to do in that period. They would apply for 12. So if the company goes down back because the big partners have left, down to their obligation as per the prospecting license, 2 wells, they're still compliant. They still will be compliant. So we have not had, I'm sure about that aspect, we have not had that in-depth engagement as to yet who will be the new partners. We know who the operator is, and whether they will stick with the original exploration plan when Exxon was part of the consortium, or they will adjust it closer to their obligation under the prospecting license.
So you have no hold-up about approving the exits of ExxonMobil and Hess?
No, we don't have any problem. If people, this happens a lot. Once we can't stop people from reconfiguration, how they're investing and where they want to participate. Once our obligations are met under the prospecting license, once people meet their obligations under the prospecting license, and this will happen in the no auction too. A lot of people, they will have to come in with the signing bonus and then a plan. And so I suspect a lot of them will bring in new partners, etc. But they would still have to comply with the plan that they submit to the government because that plan is part of the evaluation now. And there would be penalties based on fulfilling that plan. The old act and the old prospecting license was more liberal in that sense, that it just says 1 well or 2 well within this period, or seismic, X amount of seismic. Here, it goes into greater detail, the auction.
One more thing, not so much a question, but the petroleum management program. I think the issue with the program, the website, it doesn't have like a lot of complex information, but it's just a matter of like, it doesn't seem like anybody's maintaining the basic information that's supposed to be put up there.
Yeah, all right, when you meet with the minister, you'd ask why they're not maintaining that. Okay, thank you very much.